popping them back out!
Before he could take more than a couple of steps, flattened wads of lead flew back at the security guards. Not as fast as they had been shot, but with enough velocity to hurt. The foremost security guard took one to the back of his skull, hard enough to knock him off his feet. Others jumped and twisted, trying to avoid being hit by the recycled bullets.
Now it's our turn.
His mood matched the lighting in the hallway. It was dark. He stepped up the stairs and onto the floor. His thighs tight from climbing all 5 stories of his home. There was a room on the ground floor he could have converted to a study, but he preferred it where it was. He enjoyed pushing his body, walking the stairs even though there was a small elevator just off the kitchen. No, let the housekeeper use that. He would walk the stairs until he was no longer able. The memory turned over and over in his mind of that young man who had appeared earlier at his door. He pondered, why must the world continually intrude? He stepped into the study, reaching for the light switch.
Mr. Brack?
Huh? Crouching on his desk in front of the open window was a lithe, sleekly muscular man in a red and blue skin-tight uniform. His face was covered by a mask with large eyes that stared at him without blinking. He recognized the web pattern on the red, recognized the emblem stitched on the man's chest. Spider-Man pointed his finger at Carl Brock.
We have to talk.
Large eyes that stared at him without blinking. Venom hit a burly security guard with his fist, driving the man to the ground, where he sprawled across another member of the security team who already lay there unconscious. The burly one didn't get up either, just lay curled around the fractured ribs and broken collarbone he'd just received. Another security guard hung in the air, held by a fist wadded in his polyweave uniform shirt. The guard kicked out, striking his opponent with the toe of his boot. Venom turned, his pink tongue lashing the air in a swirl of saliva as he considered the man and his actions. With an almost casual shrug, he flung the man across the room. Venom stood, surrounded by broken men who were done with their chosen careers. They were all alive, but only capable of guarding the small sections of floor in which they lay. Through the door came more men with guns, bigger guns.
More guards. How delightful.
The new group filed in quickly, moving with the precision of men who had trained together.
But we really think we've had enough fun for one day. Perhaps we'll come back and play again some other time.
Venom turned away from the newcomers and bounded toward a window.
In fact, we can practically guarantee it.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Dunn McCleskey glanced up at the man who loomed over him, watching the debacle of Venom defeating the security detail and then escaping.
It is.
The man frowned. His face moved slowly into the expression, as if his hard features were actually made of stone. His shaved head gleamed in the overhead fluorescence as though it had been oiled.
Mr. Crane?
What is it, son?
Should I call ambulances for...
No. Those men can be cared for on site. The target is escaping. That's our primary concern.
The head of security for Treese International ran a hand over his head and considered his options. With Venom out of the building, there really was only one.
What should we do about it, sir?
McCleskey didn't think it was going to be that easy. The van was painted with the emblem of a TV news channel. It pulled away from the array of vehicles, police and media, that had gathered below the building. The driver spoke into his comm, even as the sensors and circuitry in the vehicle began streaming information.
Target in sight.
At the other end of the line, a man in an armored suit opened up comm links to his team.
Tracking procedures initiated. Squad, converge on my coordinates.
yes, the puzzle does remain vague.
Venom tumbled down the side of a brick building, staying loose as he let gravity do most of his work. Bouncing, he latched onto the wall, arresting his descent. Crouching there, feet and back touching the surface, he considered his situation. The symbiote rolled back from Eddie's face.
But at least we have a few more pieces. Treese is up to no good, that much is certain. But we need to discover his motives. And then we can squash him like a spider.
He peered down at the garbage piled into the alley. Dented, overflowing cans, plastic bags bursting at the seams to spill all kinds of trash and discarded food across the pavement, and piles of greasy cardboard. The floor of the alleyway was a heaping, stinking mess.
That's him. Do it.
The other voice was nearly indistinct from the first, but came from another direction.
What?
The alley became an explosion of screaming light and fiery, lashing pain. The blasts struck him like the fist of a god, driving him to the alleyway floor in a wave of concussion. His face still unprotected, Brock pushed himself up amid the smoldering garbage, the stink of it choking what little oxygen he could force his pain-racked body to draw. It felt as if he'd been pressed under a steamroller, his muscles tight, knotting up like wet hemp rope, locking on themselves, constricting to the point he couldn't think. He could only hurt.
Fight back.
The symbiote screamed in his mind. The pain it felt jangling across Brock's nerves in a psychic backlash that burned, not with the blister-hot burn of fire, but the corrosive scald of acid.
Some sort of energy hit us when we weren't ready.
You, of all people, should know, Eddie. This game has no rules.
Brock turned his head, looking up from the ground, from the midst of the trash and refuse. A man stood just a few feet away, outlined by light shining from behind him. A large man, not as broad as Eddie, especially when he was Venom, but imposing.
Who are you?
My name is Orwell Taylor, General, United States Army, retired. I'm here to teach you the concept of taking responsibility for one's actions.
The pain began to recede, but not quickly enough. Brock twisted, turning so he could better see his attacker.
You see, Eddie, a while back you killed my son.
Taylor paused, letting his sentence hang in the air. Then there was movement behind him. One by one, 5 figures moved up behind Taylor. All of them wore mechanized combat suits with helmets that covered their faces. Each of them bristled with weaponry. One had an arm made of metal that looked like a pile driver. The other arm sported a device that appeared to be some sort of gun. The next newcomer had clenched fists that crackled with plasma. The third looked almost unarmed, only holding a simple square object. Wasn't much bigger than a tablet. The fourth made up for his teammate, holding a massive gun connected to his suit by tubes and wires. The enormous firearm was mounted on a swivel arm that protruded from his armored chest. The swivel gun was heavy-duty ordnance. Most likely, that was what had laid Eddie low. It still had him suffering from grinding pain that kept him on the ground. The fifth figure hovered in the air, flying via some technology Eddie couldn't see. His suit was sleeker, a skin-tight arrangement covered in wide metallic bands. Brock hoped that was the only flyer. He hated flyers. Orwell Taylor spread his arms wide.
Now we, the jury, are going to kill you.
The symbiote boiled on Brock's chest, flailing tendrils whipping the air as the sonic blast made the alien thing scream in his head. The blast felt like a hammer on Brock's exposed sternum, pounding the thick fibrous cartilage into a sore bruise. Eddie was pinned in a chokehold by the flying jury member, who had swooped down before he could react, while Eddie was still incapacitated from the blast that had surprised him earlier. The sonic beam came from the jury member with the metal arm. The symbiote collapsed, still clinging to its host, but the bits of it that once covered his chest lay limp in tangled ribbons on the alley floor. The arm across his throat let up, but didn't let go. Brock hung there, still weak, as the symbiote burned against him. He could feel his other's anger at being hurt. Eddie shared it, letting it bubble in the depths of his stomach. Orwell Taylor grinned like a pit bull, looking down at Eddie and the symbiote.
Mr. Brock, I am a man of vast resources, most of which have lately been focused on discovering everything I can about you. For example, how the alien symbiote you wear is vulnerable to fire and sound.
But why?
I had a son, Hugh. Fresh out of the army, he became a guard at the federal prison called the Vault. He was the first man you killed when you escaped from that institution.
Brock couldn't recall Hugh's face, but he remembered that day, and the things they'd had to do to achieve freedom. They felt conflicted. Some of those who died were innocents, the very people they were supposed to protect.
We don't want to hurt anyone.
Taylor's stern visage cracked. Teeth bared and fists clenched, he lunged forward until he was just inches away from the object of his hatred.
And that makes it all right? You murdered my son!
The retired general centered himself, swallowing his rage, regaining control. Brock watched, but remained silent, waiting. This wasn't the time for regret. It was a time for survival. All that mattered now was escape. The ribbons of symbiote twitched on the ground.
That's why I put together the jury. These warriors,
Taylor swung a hand around, indicating the men in the high-tech war suits.
including Sentry, the former guardsman who holds you helpless, were Hugh's friends in the military. But now their sole purpose, like my own, is to spill your blood.
He turned to face the soldier who had blasted Venom with sound.
Screech,
Yes, sir.
adjust the level on your weapon. Set it to kill.
Yes, sir.
Screech stepped forward, lifting the weapon attached to his arm.
Well, I've been waiting for...
He suddenly peered down at his arm.
Huh? Hey!
A thin, inky tendril hung from the blaster, stretching back to its host, insinuating itself into the circuitry and rendering the weapon useless. Brock used the delay to his advantage. Before his captor could react, the symbiote again covered its host from head to toe, healing him, transforming him. Venom smiled, exposing his murderous teeth and that whipping tongue.
You have our thanks. That long-winded explanation allowed us to recover from your initial attack.
Swinging his arm in a wide, violent arc, Venom wrenched the sonic cannon from Screech's arm, leaving only a flailing of wires. He reversed the arc, and the arm flashed back over his head, talons digging hard into the back of the flying jury soldier, who still gripped him in a chokehold. The soldier tried to tighten the hold when Venom flexed and jerked the man up and over his head, flinging him into Screech. The collision sent both men tumbling down the alleyway like toys discarded by an angry child. Venom rose to his feet.
Hurting us a second time won't be so easy.
As Venom's opponents rushed in, the general backed away.
Fire off! Burn him!
The mechanized soldier with the crackling plasma hands raised them, and they flared brighter. He lunged at Venom, swinging wide. His fist cut the air. Venom stepped aside, using symbiote-enhanced speed to twist away from the attack. The fist struck the wall behind him.
Hot stuff.
Venom's fist shot forward, connecting with the faceplate of the soldier's helmet. Thick plastic lenses cracked, metal twisted, and the carbon fiber and Kevlar of the helmet pushed into the soldier's face.
Chill out.
As Venom turned and leapt away, the wall behind him disintegrated in an explosion of debris. Attaching himself to the wall 20 feet overhead, he scanned the scene below. It was the soldier with a massive cannon.
He's faster than anticipated, sir.
The soldier cut loose again, and missed again.
Don't give me excuses! Give me his head!
Bouncing from wall to wall, Venom realized he still hadn't fully recovered. Despite the symbiote's protestations, he turned gracefully in midair and shot a web, swinging away from the scene. With the flyer incapacitated, he would be able to flee.
Yes, you're right. He's ruthless, vicious, a driven man. It's too bad, really. Ugh. Under other circumstances, we might have been friends.
That's not a very friendly thing to do.
Roland Trees stood in Presentation Room 6 with Crane, his chief of security. The scene looked as if a tornado had swept through it, or a firefight. The walls were pocked with dozens of bullet holes. The carpet had been snagged, pulled, and torn in a dozen places. It was stained with blood in a dozen others, and the table with the park display was toast.
Breaking and entering, destruction of property. This venom could prove to be a problem.
A big one, Mr. Treese. He put half my security team in the hospital.
Trees took a few steps until he was standing over the splinters and the remains of the park model.
Yeah, not before the display was ruined. Blast it, Crane, I thought your men were the best.
They are. Against anything human.
Ah,
Trees walked over to the shattered window.
At least they put him through a window before he did too much damage.
true.
Trees let the high-altitude wind wash through the jagged opening and into his face. It ruffled his professionally trimmed mustache and goatee. His gelled hair was unaffected.
And before he learned anything of value concerning the park project.
He stared out into the open air between him and the street.
But what if there's a next time?
Next time, try the door.
Spider-Man hopped off the large oak desk. The older man in front of him didn't flinch or move back, and his scowl didn't change. Spider-Man put his hand up in supplication, a peace offering.
Sorry, Mr. Brack, but I need information about your son.
You wear a mask.
The tone of Carl Brock's voice made it sound like a crime on the same level as murdering women and children.
Come in through the window, then expect me to sit down and chat?
Spider-Man didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to this level of hatred from anyone who wasn't J. Jonah Jameson. Or Venom.
I have only this to say to you. Whatever relationship existed between Edward Brock and myself is no longer applicable.
Carl Brock turned to leave, then stopped, talking to Spider-Man over his shoulder.
Oh yes, there's only one other thing. Leave, or I'll have the police remove you.
Now what? I'm no strong-armed goon. Can't just beat it out of him. But how am I gonna find Venom if I don't get help from somewhere?
Mr. Spider-Man.
Spider-Man turned to find a woman standing in a doorway that led to the next room over. She was older, not as old as his Aunt May, but with a similar look of kindness in her eyes. She stepped into the room. Even from several feet away, he could see her tremble with nervousness.
I'm Sharon Dempsey. I've been a housekeeper for Carl Brock since before Edward was born. I'd be fired if Sir found out, but if it will help poor Eddie, I'll tell you what you want to know.
The air was crisp and clear as he swung up and up. He did so with the wind at his back, letting the strong gusts of it push him farther out, riding them as if he had wings instead of webs. As much as he liked the city, the Golden Gate Bridge called to him. Strung across the entrance to the bay, it stretched like the backbone of some massive fallen creature. He'd done a school project once, one of the early experiences that pushed him into journalism later in life. It had been a study on the bridge, its history, its function, its dark mystique that attracted troubled souls. Venom marked across the space, clinging to the end of a line of webbing he'd let extend dozens of feet, far longer than he normally used. Curving his body, he stretched in the upswing, letting go at the apex. The webbing spiraled away in the wind as his bulk sailed higher, before gravity pulled him down. He fell like a stone, feet slapping metal on top of the bridge's tower, one of two that held up the cables of the iconic suspension bridge. It was a wonder of engineering, a testament to human accomplishment, and even though he had nothing to do with its existence, he felt pride at what could be accomplished with determination. Standing tall, He looked out over the bay from almost 800 feet in the air. From this vantage point, the city of San Francisco looked like a model. He moved to the edge, looking down. He was so high, he couldn't even hear the traffic below. The cars, and even the bigger trucks, looked like toys.
Go back. I know. Running from the jury does seem like a cowardly act. But they had justification after all. We did kill Hugh Taylor. True, it was a regrettable necessity. Part of our quest to destroy Spider-Man, but still...
He pictured Orwell Taylor's rage and pain.
The elder Taylor's grief is valid.
Faces passed through his mind. Images of people they had harmed. Innocents who didn't deserve it. They had done many terrible things, Brock and the symbiote, when driven by anger and revenge.
But we have to ignore that for now.
He peered out across the bay, at the buildings beyond.
Innocent people in this city need us. Roland Treese has been hunting them down under the strange guise of renovation. It has to be a lie. If we could discover his hidden agenda, we might be able to stop his attacks.
The flying jury member known as Sentry swooped out of the clouds, unleashing a blast of concussive energy. Venom dove from the tower, sailing out into space as the impact pounded the steel where he had just been standing. Shards of metal exploded into the air, to be snatched away by the wind. To his chagrin, more assailants appeared, riding metal discs the size of pizza pans. Venom fell, twisting around, letting the wind currents push him back among the steel support cables that ran up and down along the bridge's length. He latched onto a cable, stopping his fall, the momentum slinging him around.
Persistent fellows, aren't you? And those cute little discs you've added to your feet must keep you airborne.
Swinging in a wide arc, he struck one of the attackers with both feet.
For the moment.
The man slewed sideways, falling in a wide spiral. Venom watched him fall for a moment before leaping into space. Firearm, a jury member with a crackling plasma fist, narrowly missed Venom as he flew beneath him, leaving twin trails of energy.
We felt your heat long before you got here.
Missed! Sentry! On it, Firearm!
A split second later, something hit Venom from above. Like a battering ram, it struck him in the small of the back, threatening to break his spine and driving him out of the sky.
Ryan had never trusted the League of Vampires. Their tendency to
Marty was 25 hours into a 26-hour audiobook, a hyper-violent urban fantasy about a monster hunter and his family of misfits. It was read by an actor he liked, the one with the gravel-soaked and whiskey voice who spoke as if he were reading the script with a squinting eye, and the action was getting intense.
The Archmage swung down from the chandelier.
So intense, Marty didn't mind being stuck in traffic on the Golden Gate Bridge. He didn't like traffic, though, and really didn't like sitting on bridges in his semi, so it took every bit of blood-spattered vampire killing to keep him preoccupied.
What the hell?
The impact knocked his foot off the brake pedal, and the truck started moving.
Oh, hell!
He fought with a wheel, but to no avail. The side of his trailer swiped a van. Both vehicles crumpled. Marty leaned out the window to see the damage. A human figure, wearing a suit like that Iron Man guy, came flying out the side of his trailer. Motion pulled Marty's attention upward. 3 other helmeted figures flew above the cars. Marty had no idea what was going on, but he sure as hell hoped his insurance covered damage from super people. Keeping balance on the hover discs was a pain in the ass. It would have been difficult enough under normal circumstances, but the weight of the cannon swivel-mounted to Bomb Blast's chest made it damn near impossible. He had to fight the weight of it, constantly teetering on the tipping point. His back hurt like hell, but adrenaline from the fight rushed through his veins, gifting him with a heightened combat awareness. His teammates sailed out of the tractor-trailer, arcing up toward the rails of the bridge. Twisting in midair, Sentry engaged his suit's thrusters, but he was back in flight. Their quarry didn't follow.
Sentry's clear.
Bomb Blast pulled up on the cannon. Racing on the hover discs, he zipped toward the hole that had been ripped in the truck. He cycled up the charge in his cannon, feeling the device hum in his hands and back through the chest harness. The buzz of it spiked his adrenaline even more, making him tingle from the bones outward. Closing in, he took aim.
Eat plasma bolts, you lip-smacking lunatic!
As if on cue, Venom appeared, leaping out of the trailer just ahead of the explosion that shredded it.
This soon before lunch? Merciful heavens. That would simply ruin our appetite.
His trajectory took him straight toward Bomb Blast.
But perhaps, if we had a little exercise first.
Before Bomb Blast could veer, the black and white Creek connected, and solidly. The plasma cannon shattered, and Bomb Blast went flying, striking the bridge with enough impact to knock him senseless. Firearm's hot magenta energy hit Venom in his side with enough physical force to drive him sideways. The symbiote constricted around Eddie.
Battering pulse caught him by surprise. Keep him down, round shot.
Screech sped toward their target.
I'll take him apart.
The cybernetic limb crashed across Venom's jaw, shattering finger-long fangs that filled the entirety of their mouth. Screech didn't need his sonic weapon to do this.
Not so fast, Screech. Leave me a piece.
Sentry Fist struck Venom in the mouth as well, spinning them around.
Fight!
No sweat, pal. There's enough for us both. On me.
The two jurors fell into a practiced formation, bracing themselves in mid-flight, then striking together with armored fists. A pair of vicious uppercuts knocked Venom over cars and trucks, across the lanes to the other side of the bridge.
That's one weapon the lone maniac will never have. Teamwork.
Sentry's teammates gathered around him.
Come on, let's finish the job.
With his boot jets, Sentry flew to where their quarry had disappeared, then pulled up short, hovering as the other soldiers drew close. Cars and trucks were everywhere, pointed at odd angles as their occupants spilled out into the lanes. The civilians were looking up and around in confusion at the chaos that had been dropped into their laps.
Hey, where did he go?
One of the people looked up at them, a blond, short-haired man in a dark blue business suit. He seemed thoroughly disoriented. A young teenage boy stepped to his side.
I saw, but I don't understand.
Sentry didn't respond, but just hovered menacingly over the pair.
1 second, he was here, and the next, he started to fade. Blended right in with the concrete. He just disappeared.
Use the blasted alien to camouflage himself. What now? Search and destroy? We need to find him or the general will be mighty pissed. No!
Ramshot spun on his hover discs.
Emergency crews will be here any minute. There'll be another time. Yeah, and soon.
Bomb Blast and the rest of the jury members flew off, following the contrail of Sentry's thrusters.
Are we gonna be on TV, Dad?
The man with the blue suit and the short haircut glanced down at his son.
Oh, Lord. What would the neighbors think?
He held out his hand. The boy took it and began following as the man tugged him along.
Let's get back in the car, Timmy. I think it's best if we keep a low profile.
The soft gleam of Rorschach eyes watched them from the underbelly of a truck as they passed it by.
Mr. Brock keeps a low profile in most things, Mr. Spider-Man.
Sharon Dempsey fidgeted, her hands moving in steady rotation around her body, touching her elbows, one shoulder, then the other, her chin and her hair, adjusting her glasses, then moving back down to touch fingertips to palms before the cycle started again. Spider-Man tried his best to ignore it. He learned long ago that if someone was talking and fidgeting, they were generally being honest. Or, if they were lying, they were doing it badly. She looked up at him and stopped. Her hands froze in midair like rabbits caught in the headlights. After a moment, she tucked her arms behind her back.
It's the eyes. They freak people out. Some people. Most people.
Nobody complained about them when he was fighting or swinging by, or even when he rescued them. But he'd seen enough comments online to know that the size and shape and blankness of them unsettled some people. Apparently, Sharon Dempsey was one of those people.
He's not terribly emotional. In fact, I doubt anyone was more surprised than he was the day he fell in love. Jamie became his wife and his world. He wanted her to have everything that would make her happy, and what she wanted most was a family.
Dempsey pointed at a framed picture on the wall. It showed a man and a woman, and it only took Peter a second to recognize the man as a younger Carl Brock. He was actually smiling in the photo, standing beside a very pretty woman, her hand on a very rounded belly.
But when Jamie died giving birth to Eddie, the part of Carl that allowed him to care for another person died along with her. Not that he was cruel or abusive. He saw to it that his son got the best education, the finest health care, the latest toys. But what the child really needed was the one thing Carl Brock could no longer give: affection. In school, the boy worked hard, but his reward for perfect marks was a terse, "That's nice, Edward, now why don't you go out and play?" He excelled in sports, hoping that trophies and medals would do the trick. They didn't.
Spider-Man still didn't respond, even though the woman looked at him expectantly. He was too busy thinking about the differences between his upbringing and Eddie's. Carl Brock seemed cold, disinterested, and distant.
No wonder Eddie became a psychopath.
His own childhood, after Peter Parker went to live with Aunt May and Uncle Ben, was the best. Aunt May was a dream, baking treats, always there to hug him and give him a word of encouragement. And Uncle Ben, rest in peace, showed Peter how to be a man who can be strong, but doesn't have to be closed off. He proved by example that a man can feel, and that feeling keeps him humble and kind. Peter still missed him. He thought about it often, deep in the pocket of the night, the time before the sun came up, when the world, even the Big Apple, was quiet. He didn't know which to find his life more: being bitten by a radioactive spider and granted the superhuman abilities that made him Spider-Man, or the life and death of Uncle Ben, the man who had raised him like a son. His eyes were hot under his mask. Sharon Dempsey shifted, pulling Peter's attention back to the present.
Then in college, Eddie switched his major to journalism. On graduating, he moved to New York, got a job at the Daily Globe, and became a newspaper reporter. He was a good one, too, driven to succeed. Surely, he felt, his father would respect that. Even at the peak of his career, when he was writing exclusive interviews with a confessed serial killer, word from Carl was rare and perfunctory. Then, when Eddie's source was exposed as a cheap prankster, Eddie was fired in disgrace, and communication between father and son ceased altogether.
Dempsey's eyes shone behind her small, wire-rimmed glasses.
More than anything else, I think that pushed Eddie toward madness. He sought his father's love, but found only shame.
The tears tracked down her cheeks, falling off her soft jaw and onto her collar. Peter didn't know what to say, what to do. He felt bad for her. He felt bad for the Eddie in her story. He even felt bad for the Carl Brock in her story, but he didn't know what to do with her crying.
Thanks, Miss Dempsey. You've been a big help.
She nodded, still crying, but he took it as his release. He was out the window in one supple move, bounding away from the house, leaping and launching a web without even thinking.
I wish it was true. I don't know if anything she told me will actually help me find Venom.
The city's skyscrapers were only a short distance away, and soon he was back among them. Pulling hard, he swung deep, low, and out, arcing to the apex of the line and sailing through the air with a spinning backflip. Pushing his body helped to clear his mind of Sharon Dempsey's sadness.
Still, like the old saying goes, know your enemy. Problem is, I may be getting to know Eddie too well. I honestly feel a little sorry for him. And is that wise? Having sympathy for a man whose sole purpose in life is to kill me?
He didn't have an answer to his own question.
It's a miracle that no one has been killed so far.
The newscaster had a small face with delicate features, quite unlike the hideous monstrosity displayed on the screen behind her. Treese watched the news report on the same monitor he'd used for the teleconference with Carlton Drake.
But police admit that those involved in the bizarre battle, Venom and the mysterious armed warriors, are still at large.
The photo of Venom was replaced by a fuzzy video taken by a bystander on the bridge. Between the phone's limited capabilities and the shaky hand of its owner, few details could be seen. That was for the best.
Obviously, this story is still developing, Bob.
Thanks, Jillian. In other news, the mayor's race is really...
Venom's still on the loose, which means he remains a threat to my plans and my gold.
Mentally running through the options, Treese realized he had none.
I guess we're going to do this the hard way.
That was easier than we expected.
The garbage truck turned left onto Clement Street, south of the Golden Gate Bridge. It trundled over the asphalt like a huge metal beast of burden. Venom lowered himself enough to peer out from under the vehicle. Bits of gravel and road grit hinged off him as he hung there, upside down, but he ignored them. His talons were wrapped around a matched pair of struts tucked into the undercarriage. The angular metal rods were nearly as thick as Venom's forearms and doing their job of stabilizing the massive payload that rode in the compactor. Above him spun the truck's axle.
Though the fact that we are now pursued does complicate matters.
As far as he could tell, the jury had nothing to do with the assault on Sanctuary, but he couldn't be sure. Evil had a way of insinuating itself into all facets of life, forming a complex web of corruption. He smiled at the analogy. The road seemed to have light traffic, not surprising since the Golden Gate Bridge was still being cleared of the chaos he and the jury had caused. A lot of the cars that would normally fill the street were still trapped on the span. He couldn't tell from his vantage point if the truck stopped for a red light or a crosswalk or traffic congestion.
San Francisco's a big place. We should attract as little attention as possible. Adopt a more conventional appearance. Mingle with the civilian populace.
Transforming back to Eddie Brock, still wearing the leather jacket, he took the opportunity to drop from his perch and spring away.
We should be fine. After all, Taylor's men can't be everywhere.
Bingo! This is Watch Post 73. Target sighted going east on Clement. Get the team here fast. I'll do what I can to make sure Brock sticks around.
The man in the van spoke into his phone, as with his free hand, he typed into a dashboard control. Something hit the cracked sidewalk and rolled between Eddie's feet. It rolled, stopping just a couple of feet away. It was a metal sphere the size of a softball. Circles and seams covered the surface, and there was a counter sunk into the metal.
Huh?
Was it a child's toy, escaped from a small, sticky hand? The psychic backlash dropped Brock to his knees on the concrete.
Sonic grenade! Put the hurt on your alien, buddy!
Brock's vision began to clear. He looked over his shoulder. A short man with a mustache and a high-caliber machine gun stood a few feet away.
But these bullets are for you!
Brock pushed himself up, swallowing hard to be able to speak. His windpipe felt as if it had been filled with gravel. Black tendrils hung off him in tatters, leaving him almost naked.
Why?
Why? Hugh Taylor was one of the finest men I've ever known.
And to avenge him, you'd condemn innocents to death?
Huh? What do you mean?
There's a colony of innocent street people, and they're in danger. We could be their only salvation unless you stop us.
The man with the mustache didn't respond, didn't press his advantage. Nor did he lower his rifle, however. Hugh Taylor had engendered a deep sense of loyalty in men such as him. Soldiers, heroes. Revenge was a strong motivation, perhaps the strongest of all. Yet this person wasn't a cold-blooded killer. A killer, yes, but not cold-blooded.
We see hesitation in your eyes. Tension easing up on your trigger finger. Not much.
The black began to return, curling up over Brock's head and spilling down his cheeks, thick and viscous. Teeth slipped through his skin and over it, relocating from their sprouting place to where they were meant to be. He could feel them, like loose teeth in a socket that were pressed back in place. It wasn't painful. Indeed, in a strange way, it felt good, as if everything was slipping back to normal.
Not enough!
A taloned hand shot out, closing on the machine gun. Venom loomed over him, and the man looked up at him with raw fear in his eyes. Slime from that lashing tongue dripped on his face, spattering his forehead and cheeks.
We should kill you, but your instinct of compassion has bought you your life. Now go, before...
A blow like a sledgehammer knocked Venom sideways and off his feet. He flew through the air and crashed against the side of a building, the impact hard enough to shatter the concrete facade and leave him dazed in a pile of broken rubble.
Sentry? But where are the others?
We were spread out across the city looking for this guy. I was the closest. They'll be along soon. Meanwhile...
Sentry let the words trail off, adjusted